Good morning and welcome. Hope you all doing well today. Hope things are going wonderful on this beautiful Sunday. The sun is shining. It's beautiful out my window, and I hope you all are having a wonderful morning so far. We're doing great here. We got a lot of great stuff happening here at the church and exciting things coming up. So hopefully you can be a part of that if you're able to be out and about. If not, keep praying for the great things God's doing here. We got our Christmas choir, which is starting to meet. And so if you can be praying for them, that will be wonderful. We're excited to just be focusing on the Christmas spirit as we, head towards hope and hope of a different future. And, right now with everything the way it is, we need to think about that. Think about a different future ahead and just ways that we can glorify God in the situation that we're in. So part of that is we're looking towards Christmas. And so if you're interested in being part of the choir, or if you're not into the choir, be praying for our choir as they come together. We had our reveal night last Wednesday, and it was pretty wonderful. Excited to see what's going to happen with that. So we're glad you can join us here for Sunday school. We just finished our book of Proverbs. We just finished Proverbs last Sunday. And so that was kind of a good book of wisdom, and I enjoy that book. We're moving on. This week we're moving into the book of Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, depends how you're brought up. It's a fascinating book, and it's one of those ones that there's a lot of folklore about, and there's a lot of interesting because the book is made up a lot of figurative and literal language. Sorry, tongue-tied this morning. But the idea, it's a very interesting book in where it describes a love relationship between a man and a woman in courtship, and many scholars have often debated several things in the book. And so, as we dive through, our goal is just to focus on twofold, really just to focus on the relationship God designed for a marriage, before, during, all of a marriage. And that's kind of the idea there. I know a lot of people are not married. A lot of maybe listening who are younger, who are single, who are divorced, who are single parents, who are maybe widowed. I know that there's a lot of different people who listen and study and enjoy the Bible, and I don't think God only meant it for those few people who are married. I think that was his design to show us what he intended for marriage relationship to be like, and what it means to love someone. And part of that is we all need to embrace the idea of how do we engage other people. If you're single, you need to be thinking about a future mate. If you're thinking about a future mate, maybe God's calling you to celibacy, and you need to celebrate that and remember these guidelines as ways you should treat other people around you. Maybe you're widowed, and this is ways you can help other people grow in their marriage, because oftentimes younger couples will look to those who have been married or those who've been around to see and to hear the stories of how they lived their life for Christ and their marriage relationships for Christ. And so it's one of those things that we can use it to grow. Maybe you're divorced. Divorce happened. Both my parents were divorced, and so it happens in life. And here's the thing, it's not a death sentence. God wants to grow you beyond that, and God wants to heal you and heal those wounds amongst that break. And there's past, and you can move forward. And so part of the Song of Solomon can help you to grow in learning how to look for future relationships, or how to treat other people in the process. And so it's a very diverse book. It's always fun because there's some romantic language of the day, because remember, this was written thousands of years ago, and so some of the pickup lines in there are a little bit dated, so it's always fun to read those if you know what you're reading. We probably will not be pointing those out, so you'll have to read it for yourself, but it's a fun book to have and to read. A lot of people try and avoid it, but we got to remember, it's God intended us for a reason. He made us for a certain way. It's the way God designed man and woman to be together and to make life, and it's just a fascinating thing. So we're going to be digging into that. Enough of my rambling, but that's the introduction to Song of Songs. It's a fascinating book, and so we're going to dig into that today. We're going to start actually on chapter 2. So chapter 2 is we're going to dig in chapter 2, verse 15. It's a very small book. Easy to get lost in, but anyway, we're in chapter 2, verse 15, and we're going to dig in. Are you ready? All right. Well, super. Here we go. There, I lost my place. There it is. Here we go. Right. Chapter 2, verse 15 says this: Catch the foxes for us, the little ones that ruin the vineyard, for our vineyards are in bloom. Woo. All right. So remember, I said figurative language. Figurative means it's descriptive of something else. It's a metaphorical type where you compare things. And so we have this idea here. You got to remember back in the day, there wasn't Walmart. You couldn't just go get the food you want. They grew everything. It was a farming community. So when we talk about vineyards and fields and, we're in a rural community, so you know about having a garden in the yard. You know what happens. The raccoons get your food. The raccoons get your chickens. The different pests get into your garden. And the idea here is that we need to be preventative in the things that will violate our personal relationships, right? The idea of catching the foxes, right? The foxes get in and the foxes do damage. Right now, we have the trash pandas or the raccoons who get into everything. If you have a garden, they've probably been eating on your tomatoes and whatnot. And, different animals get into your garden, get into your stuff, eat your melons. It's not a good thing. And we have this comparison here of being preventative, right? If you put up a fence that can keep out those things, if you do the measures to keep them away from your garden, then they can last a lot longer. And the same thing with our relationships. We need to put up preventative measures in your relationships. See, God designed a marriage, a relationship between a man and a woman, one man, one woman for a lifetime. And building that relationship, it's not something you just jump into quickly, right? It should be something that you build towards. I don't know how you say push, but anytime I see youth, I work with youth for like 16 years, and I always hated to see youth dating each other. Just, oh, look, we're dating, woohoo. Like, well, okay, you're dating, but is there a reason for your dating? Are you just dating for fun? Are you just dating to have someone to hang out with? Why are you dating? Why are you in a relationship with somebody? And this is something we need to teach our kids, because too many times we think it's cute that they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and we start building them up, and then next thing we know, they've given their heart to someone they shouldn't, and next thing you know, now you got a relative or something that you don't want them around, and that's the same thing. Or they're not good for your child, and now you're frustrated, or maybe you've gotten yourself connected into a relationship that is not good for you. But this idea here is we need to protect those relationships, set up boundaries. If you have children, teach them what they should look for in a spouse, not just randomly date people, but become friends, know people. Because here's the thing, those who've been married for a while, the passions of youth wear off, and then you've got someone you got to deal with. And if you've not looked beyond the passions of early marriage, then you've not sowed the seeds for future partnership in marriage, because that's part of marriage. You're not always going to be agreeing on everything, and you're not always going to have roses and rainbows. Sometimes you got to deal with life. Life happens. You got to work through things, and the best way to do that later in life is to start early on. All right, so I'm really speaking to those who are single, or those who are dating, or those who have kids. I encourage you just to be protective in who you let into your heart and who you let into that relationship. Now, moving on to those who are married, and those who are in serious relationships planning for marriage, you need to protect what you allow in that relationship, what you allow between you, and what you allow to pull yourself away. There's so many things that can pull you away from a good marriage and a good partnership, really, because that's what a marriage is. It's you vowing to God to stay together forever. You vowing to love and to hold through sickness and health, good times and bad. It's vowing to God for the rest of your life. And that's the thing we forget sometimes. We've seen too many of those romantic movies, and we're like, oh, no, it's going to be perfect. No, life happens. You're not perfect, all right? Someone's got to hear that at least once. But here's the idea. Marriage is hard enough on its own. Don't be letting other things get in there. Don't be letting the foxes sneak in. Don't let the world kind of pull you away from what God is doing in your marriage, right? Because you do the hard. If you ever made a garden, if you ever worked in a garden, it's hard work at first. You got to dig up the soil, you got to plant the seeds, you got to water and weed and work and work and work, and then way later is when the fruit comes. And the fruit is when people come in and try and bring division or trying to steal, and the foxes come then after the hard work. So you got to make sure you protect your family, protect yourself. Um, you got to be careful what you let in, and it's an important thing. So you got to keep yourself safe for marriage, and part of that is, how do you begin? Do you begin right? Do you begin in a safe way? Do you begin building a relationship before you give your heart to someone? And that's something we need to dig in, to be teaching the next generations, teaching them what it means to have a solid marriage foundation. And if you're married right now, you need the best thing you can do is to live it out. Live it out vocally. Explain and talk and do it. Right. But this idea here is, we've got to catch the foxes. The little foxes, they ruin the vineyard. What are the things that are going to ruin those relationships? Start with yourself. What things in your life about you that ruin relationships? Are you not trusting? Do you struggle to trust other people? Are you not trustworthy yourself? Are you, something you start examining? What are the foxes in your life? What are the foxes in your character? Do you have some character flaws you need to iron out before you get in a relationship, or you're in a relationship you need to help work through? We need to be starting with ourselves and working that way, but also setting up guidelines and protective measures to keep us safe as we are in relationships there. Let's see. Some of the themes here that we're going to really engage in, we got to remember this too, is God designed intimacy for marriage. Now, this is something we need to be vocal about. Some people are afraid to say it around their kids or explain it, but we got to remember, God designed us for a certain way. And we need to not, we gotta be careful how I present it, because for a while there, and in the 90s a lot, there was a very, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. Okay, you're married, go have fun. We were teaching contrary things. In those 90s when I was growing up, there was a lot of that. And there's a lot of people who struggled later in life because they kept being told their whole childhood that sex was bad, but then all of a sudden God designed it for marriage. So to God, and it confused a lot of people. Here's the thing: sex is good. God designed it. Intimacy is important for marriage. In marriage. One person, right? There's so much pain in this world because people don't follow those basic guidelines. They want to do it their own way. They want to go have quote unquote fun, and they don't protect their future life. They sell their future life for a good time today, and it destroys a lot. And I think we need to make sure we tell our kids tell people that it's important to have a godly marriage, but intimacy is made specifically for a marriage relationship. And we need to make sure that's people know that. God expects that. God lays that out. God has done it. It's a protective measure for us. It's a nice barrier for our future garden, is to put up the fence of celibacy until you're married. It's not popular now. People don't like to hear that, but it's the truth. And it goes not just to what we do in person, but also what do we do mentally? What movies do you watch? So many people have ruined your future marriage already because you watch all of these gushy romantic movies where all you gotta do is have a spark, and you lock eyes and you find your soulmate and everything's perfect. Well, that's not life. You're messed up. The person you marry is messed up. You both are gonna make mistakes, and you both have to grow through it. And life's gonna throw you curveballs, And it's not all about a gushy feeling. It's about a dedication to that person and a dedication to the relationship. And so you got to watch out. Watch what books you're reading, what movies you're watching. Even for our men, what kind of shows are you watching? What kind of pictures are you enjoying? And are you into things that you shouldn't be? And that's the thing is people talk about celibacy in marriage, or not celibacy, but intimacy in marriage, one woman for life. But a lot of these guys are cheating on their women, cheating on their future wife by looking at pornography or looking at the swimsuit editions or looking at whatever book or thing out there. And that's, you're violating your future spouse. You're violating your future life. That's something we need to stand up strong against and just be like, look, what are you enjoying? Because here's the thing, we can cry, and Christians do this all day, cry all day long about, oh, the media does this, the media does that, I can't believe they allowed this on these shows. Well, here's the thing, the media makes what people buy. And if the majority of America is supposedly Christian, then majority of America is buying things that are sexually explicit and video games and movies and supporting TV shows and even sports shows where, they have girls who are half clothed dancing in front of everybody. We've got to protect our future marriages by, abstaining from these things, sacrificing for these things. All right. So I'm going to get off my soapbox here. I didn't expect to go that long in this measure, but it's kind of, it's, working with youth, you get to see the damage that's done by parents and bad choices from even in youth and being, pulled in. So I get a little passionate about these sort of things, but we will go on from there. So back to our verse. Here's the beautiful thing is that the imagery here of the vineyard, is the imagery there of the marriage relationship, right? And so in bloom is really the beauty of the harvest, all right, at a future point. That's the beautiful part about a garden is you plant, you work, you plant, you work, you sow, you weed, you protect, you go, and eventually you get a harvest. And the imagery here is Solomon saying, look, if you want to protect that future harvest, you've got to set up the boundaries today. You've got to protect, to keep out the foxes, to keep out the trouble, and keep out the things that will destroy the future marriage and destroy the future harvest. Today is a day that you make the preventative measures, and you got to set up a wall, no compromise. You've got to say, this is how it is. This is, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that because it's going to affect my future spouse. It's going to affect my current spouse. If you're not married yet, if you're not married, your future spouse, if you're married, your current spouse, or, maybe you're widowed. I'm going to make these choices today to help teach the next generation what it means to live like this. And it's an important thing we need to be teaching the next generation and living out the next generation, hearing us talk about these things. How will they know if they're not taught by a future generation? The future generation is not going to know unless we teach them as we go and as they see it modeled out in our lives. All right, so preventive care. We got to make sure we're doing that. So that's the big thing, because one thing you need to know is that small things eventually become major things, and they cause marriages to implode. And if you don't deal with those early on, they're going to snowball and get bigger and bigger, and it's eventually going to cause everything to implode, fall in together, be crushed. And so that's something that needs to be taken care of early on. All right, I know I just kept going and going, but let's move on. Here we go. We're in verse 16 now. All right, verse 16, chapter 2, verse 16, it says this: my love is mine and I am his. He feeds among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadows flee. Turn around, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the divided mountains. Here's the thing that the author's trying to get across here. Again, like I said, figurative language. We don't talk about it anymore. Be like a gazelle. My wife doesn't call me a gazelle anymore. She never did, actually. But anyways, we got this imagery here. And the idea that we need to be trusting. You need to be trusting that person you're in marriage with, or you're in a relationship with, or you're going to be in a relationship with. I remember talking to this lady one time, sharing about how her boyfriend was being a jerk about something. And like, well, he's just stressed about something. Like, if he's treating you like this now, you can't trust him if you guys are planning to get married later on. That's the thing. Trust is something that needs to be from the beginning stages of a marriage, from a beginning part of a relationship. If you find someone you can't trust, then you're in a lot of trouble, because trust just doesn't randomly happen. Because they're being deceptive to other people. Guess what? They're being deceptive to you. This is the importance of, before you even give your heart to someone, that you examine them and you learn and you get to know them, right? We need to be able to trust. And I love this. My love is mine and I am his. It's this mutual commitment to each other. Now, remember, mutual commitment to each other. That's the important part. a lot of a lot of young ladies, young men too, a lot of young people are chasing after someone who is not committed to them. And that puts you in a very bad relational position, because then that gives the other person power over you. A true marriage is going to last, needs mutual commitment together. You need to be building it together, working together. It's a partnership. You're building a family together. It's an important thing. And so we need to make sure, you need to make sure you can trust the person you're getting in a relationship with. You need to be able to make sure they're going to live out integrity. Make sure they're living it out in their life and is shown in who they are. That's why you need to get to know someone before you get connected to them. And, that takes time. That takes work. If you're in a marriage and maybe you don't trust your spouse, you guys need to start working that out. You need to be able to get to a place where you can trust each other and you can build those trust. Maybe something happened in your marriage. Maybe there was a break and, you can't trust your spouse anymore. Well, it's time to sit down and work out what you need to do to be able to trust each other, because you need to build that mutual commitment together. Yes, people mess up, you mess up, we all mess up, but you need to wisely move forward. And sometimes people are like, well, why don't they just forget and forget? Let's move on. That's not how it works. I hate the saying. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. As they say, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Okay, yes, it's easier to ask, but the fallout of that is horrible. It takes time to rebuild that trust. If you ask permission, trust is there. If you just do it anyway and ask for forgiveness, you violated trust, and you got to build that trust back up, which could take months, years, decades sometimes. You got to build that back up. And so if you're in a relationship and you cause it to fracture because you broke trust, don't expect the spouse or your partner to all of a sudden come back running a week later. You're going to have to rebuild that trust. You have to build that so they can trust you. And if it's happened to you, be wise, but be willing to forgive and to move forward. And that's the important part too. You got to be able to move forward from those things. Now, if it's an atrocious thing, if there's abuse or if there's something of that nature, then you need to get, involve the authorities and involve people who can help work through that. If there's any type of abuse, you don't forget and forgive. You don't forget. You forgive and then you seek help. All right? That's the thing. You don't just forget. If there's abuse of any type, if you're in a relationship where there's any type of abuse, or you know someone who's in a relationship with any type of abuse, you need to get the proper authorities involved to help with that. No one should live in a relationship where they're constantly abused or abused at all. That's part of trust. Trust is if you can't trust someone if they're abusive, and you can't build a good marriage unless they get help, because usually people who abuse have something going on that they need help with, but they can't seem to work it out emotionally, so they abuse, which is wrong. And maybe they need to get psychological help, maybe they need medical help, maybe they need something, but it's not something you live with. If you're in a relationship like that, contact the authorities, get the help you need. Right? You forgive, but you get the help that is needed. All right? So don't stay in that relationship. Don't stay in that place. Don't stay vulnerable like that. That's part of the trust relationship if you're in that. All right? So here's the fascinating thing. And here's the sad part too, that some of these young couples, they're in an abusive relationship while they're dating, and they think it's going to get better when they get married, or that a baby comes along, everything's going to get better. If you don't find help, it's not going to get better. You can't break that cycle. All right. You need to get help. So don't stay in it. Don't just ignore it. Don't just think it's going to get better. Find help. All right. So here we go. Let's move on. Trust in a marriage. It's very important. It requires mutual trust for each other. I love it. It talks about until the day breaks. The idea of a future. Day breaks coming. You ever been there and see in the night and the sun starts to come up? I know some people aren't early morning people, but it's fascinating when you're out working in the dark and all of a sudden it starts to light up and you start because it gets light out before the sun comes up. If that makes sense. There's a light that comes out and things start to lighten, and all of a sudden the sun starts to peak above the horizon, and we see the sun coming up and the day breaks, and that idea of a future coming. And we've got to be careful. You got to trust your spouse in anticipation of a future day coming. You've got to live with in the protective measures as you anticipate things coming. Here's in this illustration here, they're talking about the marriage day. It's coming. It's eventually coming. It's around the corner. The day is going to break. It's going to be an exciting moment you head towards. All right. And here's the thing: you got to be careful. Make sure you're building towards it, not just tolerating towards it. If that makes sense. There's no. It's a fascinating thing. Anytime there's a young couple who are seeking marriage, it's an exciting time, but sometimes the marriage can distract away from building a marriage, if that makes sense. So you got to be careful. You got to instill that in young couples. Those who have been married for a while, those who are widowed, those who've been in marriage. You need to be the guardians of those young loves, because I don't know if you remember being young and engaged or wanting to get married. The heart blinds, all right? Your emotions blind a lot. And there's a lot of couples who are on their way to get married that need an older couple to step in and say, look, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you're building the right way? We need to make sure we're speaking into those lives. And if you're a young couple, seek out an older couple, one who's been married for a while. Seek their wisdom. There's a reason men married for a while. We're in a sad time when the majority. I think the majority of marriages end up in divorce, and the sad part is there's less people marrying. So there's some really sad numbers to think about. And so we need to make sure we're preparing properly and trusting properly and seeking those things and thinking about that day that's coming, prepare towards it. And if we're past that day, then we need to be preparing others towards that day. We need to be raising up the next generation to think wisely about their marriage and their life. We can't just blame the generations because the last generation, because their marriages are not going well. It goes back several generations. I've been teaching the generations how to marry properly. Anyway, so I digress. Let's move forward. So trust and respect, it reflects a lot on the depth of a marriage. You need to be able to trust each other. You need to have mutual respect for each other. And those are the foundational blocks. And if your marriage is lacking those things, it's time to take a step back. First, ask, are you trustworthy and respectful in your part of the marriage? Start with the person in the mirror. Are you building towards a marriage? If you're not married, are you building towards a marriage that way? Are you a person of respect and trust now? Because now is the time to work on your own personality flaws and your own preparations. We talked about in verse 15. We're preparing and preparing our future garden. So are you preparing now? And those who've been around a while, are you teaching the next generation how to be trusting and respectful? And one of the saddest things is to see a couple who's been around and you realize that the only reason they're married still is because they have mutual frustration with each other, and they don't respect each other. They just are too stubborn to do anything about it. And that's sad to see. You want to see a couple who are working through their issues and respecting each other in love. And so that's part of the idea. So we got to make sure, especially those who've been married for a while, make sure you're still trusting and loving and being respectful towards each other. You're still building that, because the next generations are watching you. They're watching how you treat your spouse, how you live your life. If you truly love them, if you truly respect them or not. They're learning how to be married by watching you. And that's an important thing. So, we need to make sure we're if we are married, those couples who are out there, make sure you're living that life. All right. Make sure you're doing those things. Make sure you're working towards that way to lay out a foundation for future generations. And that's the idea there, that trust and respect. And here's the thing: trust and respect happens when you're doing things together. All right. Sometimes I see people who are married, but they live separate lives. And that's not really what God intended. He intended the friction of us coming together is refining, iron sharpening iron. That's part of a marriage relationship. You should be sharpening each other, growing each other, living to grow each other. Some of those, and that's the important part. And then even some people who are maybe unequally yoked. Maybe you got married young and to a spouse who is not a believer, or maybe they had a different set of beliefs than you, and you want to go closer to God, but now they're not on board for that. Make sure you're living out your faith, being a person of trust and respect. It's a fascinating thing. I've seen it over my many years of ministry that be praying for someone's spouse to come to the Lord, and this person's like, oh, I just want my spouse to come to the Lord, and so we've been praying for a while. All of a sudden, their spouse becomes the Lord, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, the marriage is rocky because now the spouse is excited about Jesus, and the person who was coming to church all the time was kind of playing the part of a Christian. I think they like doing both, and then eventually it ends breaking the marriage up. It's a fascinating thing that has happened a couple times I've seen, and so that's a sad thing to see. And here's the thing: if your spouse is not a Christian or not saved, or maybe believes differently than you, do not follow the Christian doctrines, you need to be praying and living out your faith in trust and respect, and you live it out daily and let God fill in there. Be a person of trust. Be a person of respect. Be a person who lives out those things, and be a part of your spouse's life. Don't avoid them. If the things they do are not godly, then you let them know. You don't support those things, and try and do things together. Build that way. All right, so let's move on. We're on chapter 3, verses 1 through 5 now. Chapter 3, verse 1 through 5. Are you ready here? Well, super. Here we go. In my bed at night, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. I will arise now and go about the city, through the streets and the plazas. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. The guards who go about the city found me, and I asked them, have you seen the one I love? I had just passed them when I found the one I love. I held on to him and would not let go until I brought him to my mother's house, to the chamber of the one who conceived me. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelle and the wild does of the field, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. Okay. Yeah. Fascinating. There's a lot, like I said, again, figurative language. We got to get a hold of this. The picture that's being painted here is this woman who desperately wants her partner, right? She desperately wants that relationship with him, desperately wants the marriage date, desperately wants to be together. And there's that passion there, the driving passion, her longing for her future husband. And we've got to make sure that that longing does not lead you astray. Right? So we gotta make sure that longing does not lead you astray. And that's the picture we have here. That we have this lady who's out. She just wants her future husband. She longs for her lover. She longs for that one, the one she loves. Right? And so she goes out to seek and to find him. And she finds him. And when she finds him, she doesn't take him back to her place. Right? She takes him back to her mother's place, a place where they can be chaperone, basically, a place of protection and safety. And that should be the drive. A lot of young people who feel pressured into a sexual relationship because the person's like, well, if you love me, you'll truly do these things. And a lot of teens are pressured in that way too. And we got to make sure that they know that's not how love is. Love does not pressure like that. Love does not force like that. Love does not cause people to do those things, to violate God's commands. And here's the thing is that unfortunately current marriages and even those who have been married for a while don't teach that to the previous generation. Unfortunately, I hear more people say, well, they want to go, let them have fun, they're teenagers, I survived. Well, that's like the worst advice you can ever give. Just because you survived is good, but I have a whole laundry list of people who did not survive and whose lives were shambles, and who just because you got lucky or God blessed you, took care of you and caused you from having a horrible life, there's a list of other people who did not turn out well for, and that's why they're not here. That's why they're not around. So we got to make sure we're not just letting our kids do whatever because we think it's their glory times. We need to teach them what it means to build towards a future marriage. What does it mean to be someone who passionately loves their spouse but protects their spouse or their future partner, future spouse? It's okay to love passionately and yet still stand strong on your beliefs and what you feel, right? And that's the idea there, is that the pursuit is there, but there's also those boundaries. Remember we talked about before, protecting the garden, protecting the harvest or the vineyard. This is why you need to have those things set up. This is why you need to protect those things in your life. You only have, you talk about this before, and parents, you need to talk about those boundaries with your children. You need to lay them out early on. It's a sad part of right now. If your kids are in like fifth or sixth grade, they've already been exposed to sexuality in many, many, many ways. And if you've not been talking to them already, you're behind the curve. Even in fourth grade now, it's pretty sad how far back sexuality reaches, and it's just the way it is. We need to be talking. We need to not be ashamed of it. Sometimes we feel those things we're ashamed of intimacy in marriage and intimacy in relationships. We need to be showing those and explaining those at an early age so that the kids can see that. They don't have to learn it from movies or from their friends or from wherever. They need to learn it from us, and learn it from those who have been around, and learn it from those who have lived it, right? And that's where we need to be, teaching those and teaching what it means to avoid those temptations even at an early age. So that's a fascinating thing. So and I love how this verse wraps up. It wraps up with this. It says, "Do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time." Right? Part of love is emotional, and your emotions can get worked up. Just see any junior high kid who have had their first love break their heart. They think their life is over. Any high school kid, it's a sad thing. You can stir up these emotions, and you can stir up what you think is love, and really it's just lust. You stir up these things, and this is why I do not encourage people to push their kids towards dating at a young age or being girlfriend, boyfriend. A lot of parents think it's cute. You're not. You're stirring up things. You're stirring up things you shouldn't already. And I'm not against it. I'm just saying you don't stir it up. If your kids want to date someone they think they can have a future life with, that's what you need to point. If they want to have a girlfriend and boyfriend, you should be sitting down and saying, look, is this someone you want to spend the rest of your life with? Is this someone you see you could, have a family with and, live the rest of your life with? This is the things we need to instill, because right now, a lot of times, oh, it's so cute, you guys should make a cute couple, and that's not the thing to teach. Parents, grandparents, you've got to protect this next generation by showing them, look, don't stir up love until the appropriate time. Don't stir up, don't awaken these things until you've met that person you want to spend the rest of your life with. And that's really what God designed them for. But we're so, dating saturated that we teach our kids at a young age to be seeking someone who's fun and looks good or whatever. Just watch any movie, any teen movie, and that's what it is. They got to find the right person, or have the zing or whatever. And no, you're awakening things. And here's the sad part: when you awaken those things in kids and teenagers and young adults, they don't go back to sleep. You open certain doors, you can't close them again. That's the way it is. I remember reading some studies and find out, I'm trying to remember now. I don't remember the exact dates, so I may be off a little bit, so you can fact check me, let me know. But the study said that most of the people addicted to pornography in their 30s had their first exposure to pornography in a sleepover as a preteen. So basically they were spending the night at someone's house and they were exposed to pornography then. And that started the path to being addicted to pornography in your 30s, by your 30s. And so it's a fascinating thing, because you stir up these things. And once you open those doors, once you go down that hallway, you can't close them or put them back to sleep. It's going to become a battle. It's going to become a battle. And that's the hard part, is all these young men, young women are exposed to so much sexuality that it's awakened in their hearts. And so it becomes a battle for them. It's a battle in everything they do, because they're so exposed. And so when those doors are open, it's not easy to close them again. It's a battle to fight and be careful. So that's why you gotta be careful what you're awakening. And here's a fascinating thing. It even talked about the adults who have been married and divorced and they're dating again. How much harder it is for them sexually because they've already been through that path in their life, and it's a struggle. So if you're an adult and you're single and you're dating, you're divorced and you're dating again, it's the same thing. You need to keep yourself pure until you're in the bounds of marriage, right? That's the important part there. No matter how young, how old, you've got to live that out. You got to live that out in your life. It doesn't matter how old you are. You've got to live out that purity, live out what it means, live out an example. And we need to teach that to the next generations. They're not going to learn unless we tell them. Right now, the culture is telling them to live free, do what they want, and it'll work out. And that's not it. And we have young teens labeling themselves by their sexual orientation before they even should be having sex. And it's just like, what are you doing? You're not defined by your sexuality. You're not defined on by your lust and by what you think and by what you do. You are who God made you, and we need to start instilling that in the next generation. And because they're awakening things and they're struggling with things, and they have access to more things than even I can imagine. I grew up in the '90s. That's not that was when technology was starting to come out, and other people will try and push people towards those things, and the young adults, young kids, everyone, they're dealing with things some people of us will never even thought we'd have to deal with, things that are out there. And so we need to make sure we're laying a good example. Now, I may have said we were in, I don't know what I said. Look, I'm reading a comment here. Only 8 chapters, so maybe I said chapter 15 on accident. I meant chapter 3 or chapter 2 verse 15. That's back at the beginning, so hopefully you guys are all with me. Anyway, we're gonna kind of wrap up here with the idea that we gotta make sure we're not stirring things up. Don't be stirring stuff up in your own life. If maybe you're married and maybe there's a person that has sex at your work that has been extra friendly, be careful what you're stirring up. Protective measures. If you're young and you just want to start dating someone to date someone, don't stir up things yet. Don't awaken love yet. Don't awaken the emotions that are going to pull you away, because your heart is fickle. I think I said that right, fickle. It can be easily swayed. It can be easily confused. It can be easily deceived. Your emotions can deceive you and blind you. If you're young, don't awaken love until you find that person that is who you want to spend the rest of your life with. If you're young and you're married, be satisfied where you're at. Don't be stirring up things with people around you and with certain technologies and things. Be careful what you're stirring up. If you've been married for a while, be satisfied with the bride of your youth. The partner of your youth. Don't be looking at other marriages or other people and being stirring up lust towards them or stirring up things towards them. Be focused on that, and be focused on what you're responsible for. All right. Well, good. I hope you're all enjoying this time together. I'm glad we're going through this. It's an interesting book to go through. It talks about a lot of things. Really talks, but each one of us can take away something, but it really talks about that marriage relationship and the importance of it. Remember, God made one man, one woman for a reason, for the two to become one. And that relationship is important. We need to protect it, and we need to be growing in that together. And we need to be protecting it as a church family and be an example as a church family. And we need to be encouraging in that. And, that's how we move ahead as the next generation. We want to win the next generation. You got to pour into them. You got to love them. You got to show them how it's supposed to work. And, that's a fascinating thing. So anyway, we're going to wrap up because I'm just babbling now. We're excited. Next week, we're going to jump into chapter 5. Chapter 5, I think. Chapter 5, verses 6 and so and on. So if you want to read ahead, we're going to be in chapter 5 next week. Not chapter 15, but chapter 5. We'll be digging into more of the Song of Solomon and talking about that and just talking about what it means to be in a relationship and invest in that relationship. So appreciate y'all being here today. Hope God's working in some mighty ways in your life. I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer, and then you guys will be dismissed. Hopefully, you can join us for worship at 10:15. Unless you're watching this at some other time, then you can enjoy it whenever. All right, let's pray, and you'll be dismissed today. Dear Lord, just thank you for this time we can spend together, Lord. I pray for those who are listening to this video, Lord. I pray that that you're working in their hearts and their minds, Lord. And as what we study today would move in their hearts and move their minds to grow in you, Lord God, and set up those protective measures in our life, Lord. And God, I just ask you just to be with them, even though we're not here in person together, Lord God. I just pray for each one of those people watching this video. You know, no matter where they are, what they're going through, Lord, I pray that you awaken in them the desire to live a life of integrity, to live a life of purity, to live a life dedicated to protecting the bounds of marriage, whether it's theirs or someone else's. Lord, I pray that you just move in a mighty way. Lord, I pray that you just guide and direct us all, Lord. I ask this all in your holy and precious name, and amen. All right, thank you for joining us again. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next time. Bye.